E-bike designs are kind of everywhere these days, right? A lot of brands are pulling from the same playbook, using similar aluminum frames and off-the-shelf parts to crank out something fast and affordable. But every once in a while, a company shows up and does things completely differently, and that's exactly where Vintage Electric fits in. These folks aren't just building e-bikes, they're building rolling pieces of eye candy that feel as good to look at as they do to ride. One of their most eye-catching machines is the Roadster 2.0, specifically the 72-volt version that's currently up for pre-order, with deliveries expected around August 2025. Fair warning though, this isn't a budget toy. You're looking at a starting price of $5,494. So the big question is whether all that style and performance really justify the hit to your wallet. Vintage Electric has carved out a very specific niche for itself over the years, leaning hard into that classic throwback motorcycle vibe. Every bike they make looks like it rolled straight out of another era, and the Roadster 2.0 is no exception. The moment you see it, your eyes go straight to that chunky engine block sitting in the middle of the frame. It looks like something you'd expect to see on a vintage gas-powered machine, and it's a design cue that's pretty much become Vintage's signature. Here's the fun twist though. That engine block isn't just for show, that's actually where the battery lives. I'll admit, the first time I saw one of these, I assumed it was purely cosmetic. But nope, that bold centerpiece is pulling double duty, and it does a great job hiding the tech in plain sight. The rest of the bike leans heavily into that bobber-inspired look. The frame tubes are sculpted in a way that really sells the illusion, and the inverted front fork, round headlight, and that trumpet-shaped top tube all work together to make it look like a classic fuel tank from a vintage motorcycle. It's the kind of bike that makes people stop and stare at traffic lights. Inside that faux engine block is a massive 1,300 watt-hour battery. On the lowest power setting, Vintage claims you can squeeze out up to 90 miles on a single charge, which is seriously impressive. Even if you're riding harder in the highest power mode, you're still looking at around 40 miles of range. That's plenty for commuting, cruising, or just ripping around town for fun. If you do manage to drain the battery, recharge time isn't too painful. In about 3.5 hours, you're back to full and ready to roll again. The downside is that the battery isn't removable, so charging means bringing the whole bike to an outlet. And with the Roadster tipping the scales at around 86 pounds, that's something you'll want to plan for, especially if you live upstairs. A big reason this bike weighs what it does is the motor. And wow, is it a spicy one. Officially, the rear hub motor is rated at 750 watts nominal, which keeps it playing nice on paper. But flip it into race mode, and it can unleash up to 4,000 watts. That is an absolutely wild number for an e-bike, and it explains why the Roadster has such a reputation for being brutally quick. Despite all that power, the Roadster 2.0 is still classified as a Class 2 e-bike in street mode, where assistance cuts off at 20 miles per hour. Switch over to race mode, though, and this thing can hit up to 40 miles per hour. Let's just say that's not a mode you'll want to use everywhere, or with anyone watching too closely. Comfort hasn't been ignored either. The relaxed geometry, wide sweeping handlebars, and plush saddle all help keep things easygoing. On top of that, you've got an inverted front fork with 60 millimeters of travel to smooth out rough pavement, and chunky 2.35-inch Schwalbe tires that add both grip and cushioning. Braking duties are handled by ProMax Lucid hydraulic disc brakes, and they come with integrated regenerative braking. That means you're not only stopping confidently, but also feeding a bit of juice back into the battery as you ride. The drivetrain itself is simple and clean, since the Roadster runs a single-speed setup, which honestly fits the bike's character perfectly. One small but really nice touch is the cargo mount tucked onto the seat stays. This means you can add a rack and turn the Roadster into a surprisingly practical urban machine, whether you're hauling groceries, a backpack, or your laptop on the way to work. Vintage Electric as a company has been around since 2013, and their story started at a vintage car show in Monterey. That debut pretty much set the tone for everything they've done since, blending classic aesthetics with modern electric performance. They're closing in on 13 years in the game now, and it shows in how refined and confident their bikes feel. If you're curious about what riding one of these is actually like, Vintage Electric invites people to check them out in person at their factory showroom in Santa Clara,